It's 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, and I'm sitting alone at my favorite bar. I've been here alone for about 30 minutes, slowly drinking my first beer. My crush friend is out and about trying to spend the evening with another man, and she promised to come back to the bar to tell me about it as soon as she's done. Doesn't sound like a good situation, does it? It sounds even worse when I tell you that it was her idea, and I supported her decision. I'm not a cuckold, in fact, I'm far from it. But when the theme of revenge is so prevalent in your thoughts, I think sometimes you agree to things that would never normally be acceptable. This is one of those cases. I know it's a little confusing, so in order to tell this story, I think I need to go back to the beginning so you can see the whole picture and understand why this needs to play out the way we planned. It started out as a true love story, but you will see before I finish that apparently there was only one in love, and that one was me. My name is Ken Singleton, and I'm probably the most average guy you'll ever meet. I grew up in a small rural town a few miles outside of Omaha, close enough to enjoy everything a big city has to offer, but far enough away to maintain a simple lifestyle. My parents had a true middle American relationship, loving and supportive of each other and their children, and raising us to know the difference between right and wrong. They followed us at every school event we participated in and encouraged us to be strong in pursuing what we want, but not in the sense that we would hurt other people in doing so. I didn't always agree with my parents, but by the time I went to Lincoln for holiday, I realized that I needed to strive to find a partner who would allow me to have the same kind of relationship they had. Because of this, I didn't really consider the thousands of young women who attended the University of Nebraska as potential sexual partners. I was looking for my future wife and was ready to spend the necessary time on this. This girl turned out to be Naomi Simpson, a cute brunette medical student from Lincoln. I've said before that I was an average guy, but when Naomi and I started dating, I definitely stepped above my class. She was beautiful in my eyes, just a couple of inches shorter than my 5'10" height, with beautiful green eyes and dimples when she smiled. She carried a little extra weight, but it was well distributed, giving her what seemed to be soft curves in the right places. We shared an elementary language class, and the professor was so thorough that we sat in alphabetical order from day one, which meant Simpson sat to the left of Singleton. That first greeting when she sat down next to me is still deeply etched in my heart. I had a huge crush on her, so when I asked her to join me at the student union for a soda after class, I was thrilled when she said yes. This was the beginning of a courtship that would continue throughout college. We agreed to postpone the wedding until after graduation, but in fact we were a couple throughout, even moving into the same apartment at the beginning of our third year. We got married in her family's large church in Lincoln, which was only 90 miles from where I grew up, so I had good support from family and friends. After our honeymoon, we lived in Omaha, where she got a job as an emergency room nurse, and I got a job as a civil engineer for a local company. Since she was a new employee, Naomi started working the night shift, which meant I slept alone 3 or 4 nights a week, but we more than made up for it on the nights we were home together. It seemed like I had married the perfect partner, just as I had originally planned. Due to the difference in our shifts, we decided to delay having kids for a while, which allowed us to build up some savings for when one of us decided to stay home and raise them. Naomi loved working the night shift because she didn't have to deal with what she called the politics of the day shift, where special services and administrators were around to interfere with her patient care. She missed out on several opportunities to move to the day shift, but after we discussed each one, we agreed to let her stay where she was. After 10 years of marriage to Naomi, I began to feel that perhaps I was not in a perfect marriage after all. I was more than ready to start a family, figuring I still wanted to be young enough when our kids were in high school to participate in family activities. A little math told me that if we wait much longer, we might not start having grandchildren until our late 50s or 60s. Naomi disagreed, saying she had so much invested in her nursing career that she wasn't yet ready to give it up to raise a family. It got to the point where every time I tried to raise the issue, I was immediately rejected. I started noticing other changes around the same time. When I came home from work on the evenings when she had to go to her shift, We usually had 30 minutes to see each other, and although this was not enough for meaningful sex, we could become quite intimate, using it to last before her weekend. By this time, those 30 minutes had dwindled to the point where she didn't want me to bother her while she was getting ready to go to work. Our intimate time together now amounted to a quick kiss on the cheek as she walked out the door. I still loved her deeply and still wanted to spend the rest of my life with her, but I didn't like the direction we were going in, so I waited until we both had a couple of days off together. I booked a 2-night stay at an overseas vacation home in Iowa, hoping we could rekindle what we'd lost. When she returned home from work in the morning, I suddenly informed her about it, hoping that she could see my efforts to give us some important time together, away from the pressure of our jobs, where we could focus on ourselves. It turned out that it didn't suit her at all. She wasn't mad at me, but I could tell she didn't mean to go. She led me into our living room and told me to sit down. A pain in my stomach began to form, and for the first time I felt like my marriage was in serious danger. "Ken, this is going to be difficult," she said. "I hate that I have to have this conversation with you, but it has to happen." She swallowed and looked away from me as she continued. "I don't think I'm in love with you anymore. I still love you, and a part of me will always be. But I'm starting to realize that staying in love with you is no longer possible." She paused, and I let the words sink in. My first thought was one of deep sadness, as I knew she was the one I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, and her announcement made me realize that she didn't feel the same. I started to feel anger building inside me, but I knew that yelling at each other wouldn't do anything. So as calmly as possible, I knew I needed to find out why. I asked, "How long have you been feeling this way, Naomi? I knew things were different for us than they were when we first got married. What has changed?" She sighed and looked at me. "I'm not sure anything has changed, Ken. I just don't know if I loved you as much as you loved me. I know it sounds terrible, and the last thing I want is to hurt you. I think looking at it from the beginning, I could see that you were, and still are, an incredible person, with so much love to give. I thought that eventually I would find the same love for you that you had to me. Now I'm not sure that this will ever happen." So my marriage was a sham from the very beginning. It became increasingly difficult to control my anger, so much so that my hands began to shake as I sat on the couch. The next questions I asked were out of anger that was growing by the second. "So you found someone else and decided you could love him more than me?" She looked away. The issue was resolved. "Yeah, Ken, there's someone I've been talking to, and it seems like we have more of the same philosophies on life than you and I do." "What the hell? How much time do you need to spend with a guy before you figure out that you have the same life philosophies?" I thought about her nightly schedule at the hospital and immediately wondered if the shared philosophies meant she found an ER doctor who was available when she was. My next question was filled with pure anger. "So you're telling me you found some hot young doctor and cheated on me?" She quickly turned around and replied, "That's not true, Ken. In fact, he's not a doctor at all. He doesn't even work at the hospital. He's our accountant. In fact, you told me to find him, although I didn't realize at the time that I would find someone to fall in love with. You told me to do my taxes since I had days off during the week, and it would be better if you didn't have to miss work. For the first few years, it was strictly business, but after we got to know each other enough that we could both see the spark there, it escalated to us starting having lunch together. Again, only for business, and only for business. Time for tax season. But I finally realized that I had more than professional feelings for him, and it turned out that he felt the same way. Dinners started happening after tax season ended, and I began to feel very comfortable with him, so much so that I felt like I could tell him anything. By this time, we both had tears in our eyes, and I could tell that her decision had been made a long time ago, which made me even sadder. With the last bit of anger in me, I forcefully asked another question. "Is he better in bed than me?" She sobbed and shook her head in denial. "Ken, please. I haven't slept with him yet. This isn't about sex at all. Believe it or not, I still love you enough that I didn't want to hurt you by having sex with him while you and I are still together. Enough already. It's hard to see how much pain I cause you. Adding this would be even more cruel. At this point, I was speechless with anger, concentrating instead on the pain she mentioned, so I didn't know whether I believed her or not. The pain I felt was the worst of my life, but I knew I had to do something. Would it be good for me if I begged her to change her mind? I didn't think so, but I had to try. I stood up and came face to face with her and asked, "Is there a chance that you're wrong about this, and that this is just a temporary infatuation that you'll get over? I'm not glad you even found a guy to be so close to. But if you haven't slept together yet, I'm willing to fight for you and try to restore what I thought we had together." She came closer to me, put her hand on my arm, and lowered her head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Ken. As much as I hate telling you this, now that I've said it, there's no turning back. Please don't hate me, although I understand why you might." I turned away from her and went into our bedroom. I grabbed our 2 suitcases and started filling them. I half expected her to follow me, but she preferred to let me do it myself. After I filled my suitcases and bag with my toiletries, I started lugging them to my car. I knew I would have to come back eventually to get the rest of my things, but what I had was going to last me for a while until I had more permanent plans. Naomi was still standing there as I headed for the door. She was still crying, which I thought was melodramatic since she was getting what she wanted. Part of me wondered if her tears were because she still loved me, at least a little, enough that the pain she knew I felt after being caught off guard hurt her as well. I stopped at the door and turned to her. "Are you going to file for divorce, or do you want me to do it?" Through tears, she replied, "No, I'll take care of it. It's the least I can do. Ken, I promise I won't chase you around trying to get everything I can. Let's do this in the least painful way possible. Please give me know where you'll be staying so I can send you your paperwork there. I don't want to embarrass you at work in front of your coworkers." I shook my head and left the house for the last time as a resident. I was going through the typical stages that happen when this happens. Was I not good enough for her? Was I bad in bed? Did I not pay enough attention to her? Were my expectations for my children too high? How long has it been since she loved me? Why couldn't I see it before it happened? The divorce went smoothly. She filed for divorce as soon as I moved into my new apartment. This was probably as amicable a divorce as possible. I'm sure some of my friends felt that I should have fought her, trying to get more than my fair share, since she was the one who damaged our marriage. But Nebraska was a no-fault state, and even if it wasn't, I was mature enough to understand that she didn't want to be married to me anymore. So what was the point in fighting? Once I was notified of the divorce, there was a 60-day waiting period, followed by 30 days after the divorce was approved before it became fully effective. Neither of us could get married within 6 months of the divorce being final, but that definitely wasn't a problem for me since I didn't even want to think about marriage again. Instead, I developed an unhealthy routine of hiding out in my apartment after work and on weekends. I wasn't ready to try to find another woman, yet as the pain of the divorce was still too fresh in my mind. Luckily, my family and friends supported me, ultimately encouraging me to start living again. I knew they were right. I needed to stop wallowing in the self-pity that had consumed me since the day my marriage to Naomi ended. I found a trendy sports bar in a strip mall about a block from my apartment. After a few visits there, it started to seem nice to go in and spend time watching games with friends. Eventually, I started spending 3 or 4 nights a week there, watching games and enjoying the company of others like me. I also met the next woman in my life there, although at the time I still didn't want to date again. Shannon changed all that. She was one of the regular bartenders, and it was easy to see that all the customers loved her, even the wives and girlfriends of some of the guys who brought them here. She always smiled, and it was contagious. For the first time since my divorce, I smiled and laughed when I was next to her at the bar. One quiet middle evening, she came up to me. "Okay, Ken, you've been a customer of ours for quite some time now. What's your story? Why are you suddenly one of our most loyal customers?" I told my story to family and friends, so telling her wasn't a problem. She listened as I talked, sometimes stopping me to ask a question. I could tell she had a sympathetic ear and was genuinely concerned as I conveyed to her The pain I felt upon learning that my marriage was ending. When I finished, she patted my hand and said, "I'm sorry, Ken. I wish she had saved you many years of thinking your life was perfect by telling you all this sooner. It may be hard to believe, but the pain, it will get better. I know this from my life, so I know you will get through this too." This seemed like a harsh statement, and she could see the surprise on my face, so she continued to tell me her story. Like me, she and her husband met in college, but he was a senior when she was a freshman. He earned a business degree and went to work in Kansas City, begging her to drop out and join him so they could get married. She agreed, and for several years, they seemed happy. But when he confessed to her that he was having an affair with his administrative assistant, who was also pregnant with his child and he was the father, she immediately left. She came out well in the divorce, including receiving alimony. She was currently working behind a bar as a college dropout with no real marketable skills. I could see traces of pain in her eyes as she shared with me, but her divorce happened 2 years before mine, so she was mostly over it already. She was now happy working as a bartender and enjoying the customers who appreciated how friendly she was to them. It was easy to see why they loved her. She was beautiful, with a cheerful personality, but it was the smiles she gave, plus the fact that she seemed to care about her clients more than was necessary, that really made her stand out. I knew it was affecting me, even though I swore I wouldn't get involved with any more women at this point. Over the next few weeks, the pain began to lessen, and Shannon was a big part of that. Maybe I was just imagining things, but it seemed to me that on the nights she worked, she paid a little more attention to me than to other clients. She didn't neglect them by any means. But when she had a free minute, she would come to me at the end of the bar and talk to me. I felt a little like Norm from At a Meeting. I had my own permanent seat at the bar, and she tried to keep it open for me until I arrived. About a year after my divorce became final, 2 remarkable things happened to me. The first was the acceleration of my relationship with Shannon. I made a New Year's resolution to start looking back at the dating scene, and on Friday night, I boldly asked Shannon if she was looking for a guy. She grinned at me and said, "Let me deliver these drinks, and then I'll come back and talk." It didn't help my confidence, so when she came back, I wasn't thrilled about my chances. She came closer so I could hear her over the noise in the bar and said, "I'll be straight with you, Ken. I really like you, but I'm not really looking for a relationship. The last one was so terrible that I'm not sure what I ever will." I looked at her as I asked, "Does this mean you don't plan on having, what should I say, adult entertainment in your life?" She smiled. "You're so cute sometimes. I have a lot of adult fun. I have a couple of part-time friends that I go out with when I need some adult fun, as you call it. It's purely for sex. We try not to interfere with each other's feelings. Friend, so that it doesn't complicate things. I'm not sure you're the type of guy who would be interested in that, and I'm not the type of girl who's looking for anything that involves feelings right now." Then she smiled at me and put her hand on my arm. "But if you're interested in learning more about FWB relationships, I know a girl who could show you what it's all about." She moved away to serve other customers. For the first time in a long time, I began to look at her as a sexy woman, and not just as a potential life partner. She was right. I would never consider a FWB relationship in my life because I thought it wasn't necessary after I met Naomi. But I asked myself what harm there could be, since I certainly wasn't getting sex any other way. And Shannon had just hinted to me that maybe I could change that. Realizing that I couldn't think of any contraindications, I decided to find out whether Shannon was just being nice or really wanted to teach me how to be a friend with benefits. I usually left the bar before it closed. But since it was Friday and I didn't have to go to work the next day, I decided to stay until closing so we could talk in private. She looked at me several times and saw me sitting there after my usual time, and I thought she was trying to decide why I was still there. About 15 minutes before closing, I caught her eye again, and suddenly a huge smile appeared on her face. She came straight to me and asked, "Are you still here because you want to know what a FWB relationship is?" I smiled shyly and whispered, "Maybe." She laughed and walked to the other end of the bar to close the accounts of several customers. By the time she returned, there were only a few customers left in the bar, and they were out of earshot. She walked around the edge of the bar and sat down on the chair next to me. Here are the rules. We go to your place or to my place, I don't care. We have sex, and then spend the night together or not. I don't care. We're not mutually exclusive, which means we can both have sex with other people, but we don't share the details of this other relationship. The only really important rule I have is that we shouldn't fall in love with each other. I'm willing to try this with you because, frankly, I know you've been it wasn't, and I have a feeling you'll be pretty good once you let out your pent-up feelings. But since you haven't done this before, we'll need to talk after we're done to see if you can play by the rules. Think about it while I kick these last clients out, and tell me if you agree. It didn't take me long to think things through. By the time she returned after locking the door, I was completely interested. I nodded yes to her, and she came to me and hugged me, followed by a kiss. As soon as her tongue began to wrestle with mine, I became completely aroused. We finally stopped, and she looked at me and said, "It was a test, and you did great. Where do we go? My apartment is just a block away, and it's clean, with a bed big enough for both of us. If you stay the night, I'll take you back to your car in the morning." Shannon didn't say anything. She grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the door. Making sure it was closed as we left, she turned to me, and now it was my turn to lead. We quickly walked to my apartment. At first I thought I would be a little nervous since it had been over a year since I had been doing this. But our second kiss, as soon as we walked into my apartment, did wonders to calm my fears. By the time we reached my bedroom, we left a trail of clothes on the floor, and I couldn't help but smile, seeing this beautiful woman standing naked in front of me. We had sex twice that night before we fell asleep. She was insatiable in bed, and the only thought that crossed my mind as I cooked her breakfast while she took a shower was how stupid her husband must have been to cheat on her. But I didn't care because his loss was my gain. We talked while we ate breakfast together. She asked, "So, how was your first FWB experience? Do you think it's something you'd like to continue?" I laughed back at her and said, "Yeah, that was pretty good. I think it was good enough that I wanted to do it again. It was good to see that I hadn't forgotten anything." She playfully slapped me on the arm and retorted, "What are you talking about? It was pretty damn great, and probably thanks to my incredible abilities. But now it's time to be honest. I know you're the guy who's only had sex since his freshman year of college. Out of affection. Do you think you can fully accept the idea of sex for pleasure and not seek a deeper relationship with me?" I didn't feel like I could answer this question because I didn't have time to think about it. So I said, "Let's put it that way. When can we do it again? Sex is still so much better when you have someone doing it with you." I discovered over the next few weeks that I could have sex without a relationship, or at least I fooled myself into thinking that. Shannon was an amazing woman, and what made me think that I might not be ready for casual sex was the fact that I enjoyed spending time with her at the bar almost as much as when we had sex, which, for me, was a sign of a relationship deeper than just sex. But I wasn't ready to give up sex, because it was always just as good, if not better, than that very first time in my apartment. The second unusual event came as a complete shock. I was sitting at a bar one evening when someone put their hand on my shoulder. I turned around and saw a woman whose face seemed familiar, but I could not immediately remember where I had seen her. She smiled at me and said, "Aren't you Ken Singleton?" I replied, "Yes, and you are familiar to me, but sorry, I don't remember your name." She put her hand on my arm and said, "I'm Anita Peterson. I'm a nurse in the emergency room with your wife. Well, now ex-wife. We met a couple of times at department Christmas parties." I remembered these parties. She was always very friendly to me, perhaps even friendlier than usual, but I never really thought about it. I just thought she was too friendly a person in general. She continued, "I was sorry to hear about your separation and divorce. I was hoping it wouldn't happen to you two, as you seemed like a great couple. But I think I've read in the past that couples in open marriages have a higher rate divorce rates than monogamous couples, and apparently you fit into this statistic." "Open marriage? Where did she get this from? I didn't want to seem helpless, but I needed to know more, so I approached my answer with caution. Yeah, well, that's the risk you're taking, I guess. It was good, but it couldn't last forever. Did she ever tell you much about our relationship? Anita smiled back. She talked about it a lot. I didn't understand how she could let you have women sleeping over while she was at work. But it made sense, especially after you told her that there might be a doctor or technician working at night that she might find interesting during her break. Every time I saw her go into the duty room with the night shift doctor, I thought about you, wondering if you had someone in bed that night. This dirty, lying, cheating bitch. So she cheated on me behind my back. Hell, maybe not just one, but several, and I didn't even suspect it. Any love I still had for her had just disappeared. Suddenly I was angry at myself for letting her leave me peacefully when I didn't even know at the time that she had already cheated on me. Now I suspected that she had sex with the guy she ended up leaving me with, but it didn't matter because the hatred I felt was already strong. I tried not to show my feelings to Anita, but I quickly saw an opportunity to get maybe a little revenge back. So, when you thought about me, it was thinking about whether you wanted to spend the night with me. She blushed and quietly replied, Maybe. She always said you were a great guy, and I saw that too, especially since you agreed so she could have a little fun while you were away. I'd like to have a little fun with her too. You. It was a new dynamic, but the first thing I knew was that while she was wrong to think I was in an open marriage, I wouldn't do anything with her if she wasn't. So I asked, What about you, Anita? Are you married or in a relationship now? She nodded her head in response. No, I'm still looking for the one. This was what I needed to hear. Anita was a cute little blonde, something I had never experienced before. Maybe I was going to have my first one. I smiled at her and said, Well, Anita, please don't feel pressured, but I'm not beholden to anyone yet either. And if you're still interested, maybe we could come back to my place and see how well you thought about this before. Her smile turned into a huge grin as she replied, Oh, that sounds great. I came with friends, but I'm sure they won't mind if you take me home. As we were leaving, I glanced at the bar and caught Shannon's eye as I escorted Anita out. I couldn't place the expression on her face, but it was something I hadn't seen before. After all, we couldn't be jealous of each other, could we? She made it clear that we are not exclusive. I explained to Anita on the way to her house that I wasn't looking for a relationship, but if we both liked it, I was open to continuing the friends with benefits relationship. 2 months ago, I didn't even think about this term. Now it seems to me that I have 2 such friends. Life was good. Anita turned out to be a lot of fun. And although just because she was blonde didn't mean she had sex any differently. I left her house around midnight, and since the bar was closing at 1 Sir, I decided to come back and see how Shannon was doing, and maybe even show off a little. When she saw me coming in, she didn't greet me like she usually did. I took my usual seat, and within the first 30 minutes, she only brought me my usual beer. Finally, around 12:30, she came and sat on the stool next to me. Did you like it? I shook my head. No, remember, we won't talk about other relationships if this is to work. She nodded in agreement, but I felt it was gnawing at her a little. Truth be told, I didn't know who her other boyfriends were, but if I had seen her go off with one of them, I imagine I might have felt just as strongly about it. So I changed the direction of our conversation. She told me something that I didn't expect, and it caused me a lot of anger. Unbeknownst to me, she let me know that my wife was cheating on me with at least one doctor from the emergency room at the time since we were married. Her eyes widened as I explained what Anita had told me, especially the part where Naomi was deceiving the rest of the staff to justify the fact that she had apparently been seen escorting the doctors back to the duty room. When I finished, my anger flared up again in earnest. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked. "Are you just going to leave it like that?" I turned to her and said, "If I had known about this before the divorcee, I definitely wouldn't have been so nice to her. It's too late to go on a rampage with demands for a divorce, and it probably wouldn't have changed anything. But I would very much wanted to get revenge somehow. I want her to feel the same pain that I felt when she came to me and told me she wanted a divorce. Damn, I want her to feel the pain that I feel now after knowing that she cheated on me. We sat in silence for several minutes. Shannon put her hand on mine and said, "So you want her to know what it means when your man cheats?" I thought for a couple of seconds and then replied, "Yes, I really want it." She squeezed my hand and said, "I have a strange plan, but we will have to work together. If it works, it could become one of the greatest revenge plans in history. We will become legends. Are you interested?" If she was upset that I took Anita out earlier, she seemed to have forgotten about it now. "Of course I'm in. What's your plan?" She smiled slyly and replied, "If we want her to go through the pain of her man cheating, we have to make it happen. Now you have to understand that my committed friends are guys who are not committed. I'm breaking this rule, but I can only think of one way to guarantee that he will cheat on her. I need to force him to have sex with me." I couldn't believe what I just heard. Of course, Naomi would have gone through the same pain if her man had cheated on her, but I would never have expected Shannon to do that for me, and I told her that in the same words. She countered, saying, "You're not asking me to do this. I want to do it. Remember, I've been through the same pain as you, and I want that bitch who hurt you so bad to suffer too. Because you're bigger. If you can't get back at her in a divorce, that's the next logical step." "But why are you doing this for me?" I asked. "Why would you let a strange man fuck you so I can get revenge on my ex?" She sighed and said, "The truth is, I like you, Ken Singleton. I want this to happen for your sake. I'll just treat him like a disposable friend by agreement. I stress, just this one time. If I get him to take over me, I'll set up a small camera to record the action. After we're done, we'll send her a copy of the video, and when she plays it back, our job will be done." It was genius, far beyond anything I could have come up with on my own. I couldn't believe that she would agree to do this for me. I thought we shouldn't have feelings for each other, but now I had to think about it. If we can pull this off, she will be my hero forever. Before I could say anything, she started talking again, and I realized that she was already deep into planning. "I need to know who this guy is. You said he was the accountant she used to file your taxes? If that's the case, you should already know his name since he should have signed as the preparer of your tax forms for the last few years." I never thought about it, although, to be honest, I never wanted to know who he was, because even though he essentially took her from me, I still had no desire to take revenge on him. But everything changed with the revelation of Naomi's infidelity. I made a note to find the tax records she made for me as part of the divorce agreement. Shannon continued planning. "If your ex still works nights, it will be easy to find the night she is scheduled to work and plan our little romance then. Do you think you can find out that for me?" I was a little timid as I responded, "I'm sure I can. My friend tonight is Naomi's colleague. I'm guessing she'll help me. It'll give her another reason to meet me again." I'm not sure what Shannon muttered to herself next, but I think the word was frivolous. I smiled inside. Maybe Shannon is breaking her own rules for a friend by agreement. The rest of her plan was just as brilliant as the beginning. If he approached your wife while preparing your taxes, there's no reason to think he wouldn't do it again. I don't know how aggressive your wife was before they decided to be together, but I have a feeling I might be a little more convincing than she was. And I have a couple of perfect outfits to prove it. This year I think Mr. Wife Stealer needs to prepare my taxes. That's it. The plan was completed. She set a goal of 6 weeks from start to finish. As soon as I receive Shannon's schedule from Anita, we will confirm the date. Until then, Shannon had to make an appointment to prepare her taxes as soon as I gave her a name. The trap was tempting, and my sexy friend Shannon was fully willing to be the bait. Everything turned out easy. Shannon was right that my ex's accountant's name, Jerry Van Doren, was on our tax forms. Jerry was easy to find because Naomi had attached his business card to the original forms. Shannon made an appointment to make her initial visit. She sent me 2 photos of the outfit she was wearing. The first one showed that the blouse on top was loose, unlike the leather jeans she was wearing. The second photo was taken as she leaned forward, clearly showing off her braless breasts as her blouse fell open at the top. The guy didn't stand a chance. I was able to find out Naomi's work schedule from Anita the next time we met. It wasn't yet scheduled 6 weeks in advance, but Anita assured me that they had a recurring 2-week schedule, so Naomi's Friday night shift wouldn't have been difficult to predict. Armed with this information, Shannon began her attack on Jerry, her new accountant. She reported the great success of her first visit, smilingly telling me how Jerry seemed to have great difficulty taking his eyes off her breasts. The plan was going well. Anita confirmed that the Friday we chose for the finale was indeed the night Naomi worked. Shannon pressed Jerry, and although he had completed her taxes last week, she convinced him that she was now so deeply in love with him that she wanted to continue their relationship by inviting him to her home for dinner and a movie on Friday, which we chosen. He was very happy to agree. So this Friday has come. You have caught up with the plot, up to this point. As soon as Jerry left Shannon's apartment, she promised to come to the bar and tell me about the ending. I had mixed feelings. I was glad that the plan worked so well, and it seemed like we were going to get the revenge we were looking for against Naomi. But it meant Shannon was having sex with another man, and despite warnings about not getting too attached to her, spending time creating and executing our plan made me realize just how special she was. What she did for me was also pretty special, so I wondered if she developed feelings for me along the way. She arrived around 11:30, walked slowly, and she didn't look too happy. I couldn't read her body language or facial expression to tell if she had succeeded, but I was concerned. She didn't look like a woman who had just completed a 6-week goal. She sat down next to me, and the bartender brought her a beer. I watched as she drank almost half of it before putting it on the table. She looked at me with the most serious look I've ever seen on her. I was dying to know the answer, but the longer she was silent, the more worried I became. Finally, she broke the silence. "It's all done. I had sex with that disgusting bastard, and his face is clearly visible almost everywhere on the video. There is no doubt that your ex's boyfriend is now a cheater too." I wanted to hug her, kiss her, hold her, and do many other things, but with the mood she was in, I didn't think she would appreciate it. So I just turned to her and just said, "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me. Once we get her the proof, it'll be game over and we can put this behind us. If ever I can something to do for you, I definitely owe it to you." I put my hand on her leg and left it there. We sat in silence for a few minutes while she finished her beer. She put the mug down on the bar and turned to me. "There's something you can do right now. I know you're not a cuckold and would never do that, but I need you to take me to your house right now and have sex with me. You owe me. I can't figure out what your ex saw in him. He's a disgusting pig. The last thing in me was that bastard, and I need you to change it, and it's going to take all night. You're not getting his leftovers. I made that bastard wear condom. Who am I to object?" I paid our bill, and then we walked hand in hand to my apartment. I don't know if we managed to win her back overnight, but we did it until the morning. For some reason, it didn't bother me that she had just had sex with another man a little over an hour ago. All I knew was that she had done more for me than I could have ever expected of her, and if I had to spend the rest of my life showing her my appreciation, it would be the least I could do. We sent the full, unedited version of Shannon's date with Jerry Van Doren in an anonymous package to Naomi. Although his face was clearly visible in the video, Shannon wasn't too concerned that her face might be recognized too. We both thought that Naomi was unlikely to post the video on an adult site or any social network, since it didn't seem like her style. Of course, being a scoundrel and a cheater didn't seem to be her style either, but I discovered that I was wrong about that. I expected Naomi to contact me, and I was right. About a week after she received the DVD, she wrote to me and asked to meet to talk. We agreed to meet after her shift one morning in a cafe near the hospital. When she walked in, I could tell she wasn't feeling well, perhaps because she had just finished a long 12-hour shift. Although I had a feeling there was more to it than just tiredness. My hunch turned out to be correct. She ordered coffee and joined me at a quiet table in the corner. It didn't take long for her to start the conversation I was hoping for. "I came to tell you that I found out that the man I left you for cheated on me. We're not together anymore. It seems like he didn't love me as much as I thought I loved him. Oh, it was so wonderful. Well, Naomi, I know exactly what you're talking about. This situation sounds very familiar to me, and it sucks when you find out that your partner has been deceiving you all this time, making you believe something that really isn't true. Did not have. Her face turned gloomy when she realized what I was saying. I guess I deserved it. I know you won't believe me, but I really loved you, Ken. I still do because you were the perfect husband, and I was blinded by that narcissistic behavior of yours. How good you were to me. I thought I could find someone better. It must have been terribly unfortunate. God, how I enjoyed this. Hearing those words from her mouth after what she did to me was a complete pleasure. However, she still hasn't admitted that she had affairs at work while we were married. I needed her to know that I now knew about these connections, but I had not yet figured out how to introduce it into the conversation. When I didn't answer her, she sat there looking at me. Finally, she said, I'm sorry, Ken. I came to apologize and also to see if you still have feelings for me. I've learned my lesson, and I know that I definitely don't deserve another chance with you, but I'd accept it in a minute if you offered it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. No, Naomi, it won't work. I still had these feelings for a while after our divorce, but the events that came to light have completely erased those feelings. I've moved on and I have no intention of going back. In fact, I have a couple of friends who people I enjoy spending time with. I think you know one of them pretty well. She looked at me in surprise and I could see questions popping up in her mind, but I didn't give her a chance to ask them. This Anita Peterson is a real beauty. I always wondered what it would be like to be with a petite blonde, and now I know. It's incredible. And it turns out that she always wanted to be with me, since we had an open marriage, and there were women who slept with me in my own bed while you had sex with the doctors in the duty room. All color immediately left Naomi's face, so I continued. You pathetic, worthless bitch. Not only did you break our marriage vows by having sex with other men, but you also deceived your colleagues to make it appear that everything was fine. But when the man you left me for gets caught cheating, you have the audacity to come back to me, ask for another chance. Is it so you can go back to having sex with doctors in the hospital, while you keep me like a happy, unknown cuckold, so you can fill yourself with other men? Well, fuck you. Naomi, if I never saw you again, it still wouldn't make up for the pain you caused me. But it's a damn good start. I stood up, threw $20 on the table, and walked out into the brilliant Omaha morning. The final element of revenge was put into place. It's time to forget about Naomi and move on with your new life. Now about Shannon. That night we had sex after she turned Jerry Van Doren into a traitor changed something between us. Lying together after our first round, I realized how much she loved me, having sex with a man just for me, a man who would otherwise not be able to approach her because of the standards she set for men. And because of this, I now saw how much I loved her for doing this, for me, so that I could get the revenge I wanted on my ex-wife. At that moment, Anita Peterson and any other possible friends by agreement were forgotten. I was ready to hug Shannon and hold on to her as long as she would let me. I knew you were the only one getting special treatment. I hoped she realized I was joking. She showed me she understood when she replied, Don't worry about it, Ken. I've never met anyone who can fill out a long form the way you do. She rolled on top of me and climbed on top. The first time we made love as lovers, not as agreed-upon friends. This might be the first time, but it certainly won't be the last. It turned out that there was another element of revenge that we did not foresee. A few years later, after successfully completing a revenge plan, Shannon and I went out dancing, something we did often, and on the way home, a drunk driver ran a red light and crashed into our car on my side. The airbags deployed and saved me from serious injury, but I was so shaken that standard procedure involved a trip to the hospital by ambulance. Shannon stayed with the car after being assured that the police would take her to the hospital emergency room as soon as they were done with her. I didn't even think about it until I saw where they took me. Sure enough, as soon as the ambulance arrived at the emergency room and the back doors opened, I saw my ex-wife in her medical uniform. It turns out that I became her patient for a while. The shock on her face told me that she still had feelings for me, even though it was unrequited. The paramedics updated her on my case. As soon as they left, she looked at me and, without greeting, asked, "Do I need to call another nurse to take care of you? Anita is not working tonight, but we have other nurses who could take care of you." I shook my head in denial. "Naomi, I know you're a good nurse, and that's what I need right now. Anita and I just had a good time together, that's all it was. I trust you to take good care of me." I seemed to be fine, but they wanted to keep me here for a few hours to monitor my vital signs to make sure. Naomi was in the room when Shannon entered. She rushed to the bed and gave me a quick kiss before looking up and seeing that we weren't alone. "Shannon, this is Naomi, my nurse and ex-wife. Naomi, this is my girlfriend, Shannon." They shook hands and Naomi said, "Nice to meet you, Shannon." Shannon smiled and replied, "You're welcome too. Please take good care of my Ken." Wow. Shannon added a little edge to the conversation, claiming me as one of her own, and I definitely didn't mind. But I kept noticing that Naomi was looking at Shannon with a thoughtful look. It didn't go away, and finally it must have become too much for her. She looked back at Shannon and said, "You look familiar. Have we met somewhere?" I held my breath as Shannon replied, "I don't think so. I was in an independent film made here in Omaha a couple of years ago, but I don't think it was widely released. You may have seen it." Naomi shook her head and said, "No, I don't think I remember anything like that." She left the room and headed towards the nurse's desk. I was able to breathe again and looked at Shannon, who was smiling from ear to ear. She laughed as she kissed me and said, maybe a must was to ask if she wanted a copy. God, how I love this woman. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.